Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm very pleased to have with us again Sophie Cheng, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Sinch. Sophie, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me, Doug.
Well, I'm most pleased to have the honor of actually presenting you for the first time on podcast with that title, CMO. So congratulations on your appointment, and I want to wish you the very best of luck. Now today, with that, we're going to be talking about how Sinch has developed a very interesting point of view from research you've recently done. And I think you're calling it the AI production paradox. So
Right.
we're going to dive into that in just a second. But first of all, Sophie, what is Sinch?
So Sinch is a cloud communications provider. Essentially, what that means is we help connect businesses with their customers across the globe by delivering core communications infrastructure, be that messaging, voice, or email.
And, I need to ask, since you're now the CMO, do you have a vision? Do you have a point of view about where you want to take things?
Absolutely. I think this is an incredibly exciting time to be stepping into leading the overall marketing team, but also an incredibly exciting time in our industry overall. Everything is going through a massive change right now. The marketing profession in terms of how we do our jobs, but also the communications landscape is completely changing with the rise of AI, with the rise of conversational channels, be that a resurgence of voice or be that the rise of RCS and WhatsApp, and also how that is now culminating in use cases converging. You're no longer thinking about solving a customer support use case. You're thinking about how you're helping a customer start to finish with the problems that they have. And so to me, it's very much about how can we make sure we stay top of mind for customers and that they know what problems Sinch can solve for them. And secondly, how do we make sure we stay on top of the problems our customers actually have so that we as a company are building the right solutions and our product suite is evolving with their needs. So that's what I'll be looking to solve or contribute to as the new CMO.
So let's connect that up to our topic today, which is the AI production paradox. What I thought was really interesting, we were just discussing this before we started today, was you guys walked into this with a theory or a hypothesis, actually, and then your research actually showed otherwise. So tell me all about it.
Yeah. So just to set the scene, we surveyed over 2,500 global participants. They all were high-level executives, so director, VP, or C-suite participants, and they came from enterprise companies. So that means at least 1,000 plus employees, just to help set the context in terms of where these results came from. Our hypothesis was that many businesses are still stuck in what we call the pilot purgatory. You've probably heard that term other places as well, and that means that businesses aren't able to get into production. But what we've actually found is that 62% are already in production with AI programs, so typically AI chatbots, for example. And so it's less about should we deploy AI, but it's much more about how do we reliably keep our AI in production.
And so what did you find? And you sort of discovered that they produced there was one thing to actually say, hey, this is going to go great, but actually in the field it didn't go that way.
That is correct. What we're finding is that the real challenge is actually operational reliability after deployment. So what that means is 74% of the businesses that we surveyed had to roll back a live agent. And so they were running into issues such as PII being exposed, critical data being exposed, certain hallucinations popping up in chats, maybe brand tone of voice not being deployed properly, audibility gaps. So these weren't like dramatic AI failures or AI gone rogue moments, if you will, but definitely more these operational reliability gaps.
And I guess I need to ask, why didn't they show up in development? In other words, why didn't the gaps reveal themselves?
It's a good question. I think oftentimes it came down to having the right guardrails in place for these businesses. When you're testing or piloting your agents, you typically do it in a controlled environment. And so that means you might have test scripts that you're testing against, or you've got your knowledge base. But then once it's out in the wild and you're testing it with, or you're deploying it with real customers, you sometimes can't always foresee what questions or problems are going to pop up. And so the biggest gap that we actually found was that there weren't enough guardrails in place. So truly understanding what the AI agent can respond to. And if they're not able to respond, how do you then make sure that they can escalate it appropriately or hand it off to a human agent to take over?
Now, when you say guardrails, is that another way of saying governance?
It is, yes.
So explain that to me because I hear that term, people are throwing that around, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really all about how do you make sure that your agent acts the way you intend it to act, both in terms of the response quality, the response speed. It's are we actually keeping the right compliance or security guardrails in place? That could be, different regulations for different markets, for example, and all of that needs to be set up and ideally actually set up within your infrastructure layer so that your in-house engineers don't have to rebuild some of these security checks over and over.
And so if those are in place during development, does that sort of throw up more of the problems that people later experienced?
Um, it's a good question. So what we did find is that companies that have stricter governance guidelines actually see more failures.
Oh,
So yeah, it seems counterintuitive. It's almost like more monitoring means more failures are detected. It does not mean that more failures are created, if that makes sense. So
okay.
the more mature your guardrails are, the more likely you're actually able to catch something before it happens. And that's exactly why you want those guardrails in place.
So what does that mean, mature guardrails or mature AI governance frameworks?
It basically means being able to catch problems before your customers do, right? So
Okay.
if your AI agent failed right now, would you be able to catch that before a customer reaches out and actually has to escalate that to a human agent?
And so it's interesting. In other words, this is actually a good thing in a sense, right? That, in other words, you want to have good guardrails, you want to have governance, you actually want to find those failures, and you want to find them before you start to actually roll out.
That's exactly right. And what you would ultimately want is an infrastructure provider that can help you with that. So the majority of respondents, actually 87%, said that having high performance infrastructure is really important to ensure that your AI agents can be deployed successfully. And so when you don't have that, they cite things like insufficient reliability. So that could be as simple as and as important as not delivering messages, for example, not being
Hmm.
able to support multi-channel, because nowadays consumers no longer only want to communicate over one channel, they may need to switch channels. Imagine if you're calling in to a customer support hotline and you've got a question and right now you're on the phone and then they say, okay, let's switch over to a video chat. You need to be able to support multi-channel. Oftentimes those infrastructure providers don't have that. So if you don't keep up to reliability standards, you can't support multi-channel, and then you can't integrate with different providers, especially also relevant AI integrations, then businesses are going to start looking for a new provider.
Now, I should have asked this earlier. The behaviors we're discussing, this is at the enterprise level. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. So everybody that we surveyed is part of an enterprise company, which we measured by having at least 1,000 employees.
So, if that's the case, one of the big themes of this whole year has been compliance, the big C word. So,
Yep.
let's talk about that because so many of those enterprises are financial sector, health sector, government, education, heavily regulated areas, and it seems like it would be so easy for you to slip up here.
That's an excellent question. Yes, and regulations are getting increasingly more complex. So staying on top of that is very hard, especially if you operate in a global environment. So of course, if you're a business that operates within one market, it does reduce some of that complexity. Now, that's another reason why you want to make sure you've got a strong infrastructure provider that can either build in some of these compliance guardrails or can at least provide that guidance to you by being a strong partner.
Well, Sophie, we're always saying here at TR, people watch these podcasts to find things. So tell me a little bit about Sinch then. Let's connect the dots from Sinch to these challenges. How do you help your clients?
Yeah. So we are a global cloud communications provider. So we've got customers across the globe, and we support over 200,000 customers today.
Wow.
Anything from the largest banks or healthcare providers all the way down to smaller companies, be that your mom and pop shop, also to some of your latest and greatest AI tech startups. So we really run the gamut. But I would say our sweet spot typically tends to be in the enterprise for companies that are looking to solve multinational problems. So they've got customer bases across the globe. They're looking to navigate complex compliance regulations and differing regulations across the globe. They're looking for scale. And what I mean by that is they themselves have to communicate with a large customer base, for example, and they're looking to do that again, not just in a compliant way, but also within the languages and the local nuances that communications really require. And that's exactly where Sinch's sweet spot is.
And when should they engage you? Because it sounds like a lot of people ran out there and they were very happy with the way things were developing. And then according to your survey, wow, they encountered a big problem. So when do they need to talk to you?
I would say you want to build from the right foundation from the get-go. So that would mean early on, as you're figuring out what your communications infrastructure tech stack should actually look like. We support customers from the early days when they're looking to roll out one channel to also supporting them in terms of rolling out multi-channel. And that's probably one of the things we often see where businesses will pick a provider that supports them in the one channel they're looking to roll out at that point in time. But as soon as you start adding additional channels, and when I say channel, I'm talking SMS, WhatsApp, RCS, voice, email, you name it. Once you start adding other channels, if you're not rolling those out with the same provider, you're adding additional complexity. Can you now carry over conversations or context between these different channels? And that's exactly what is expected nowadays from any business communicating with their end consumers.
Even though many of these enterprises are probably, in a sense, wealthy companies, diverse, great IT departments and so on,
Yeah.
Is it the case that there's sort of a blind spot nevertheless? In other words, when Sinch comes in, there's a cumulative type of knowledge that you guys are developing that just may not be there with the team.
Very much so. And oftentimes this is just based on legacy setups. We're seeing a convergence of use cases happening today. And the use cases that Sinch typically solves for our customers is helping send out marketing campaigns, supporting with customer updates. So think your classic notifications, for example, helping with identity and verification, your one-time PINs, and then helping with customer support. Those used to be distinct use cases managed by distinct teams. Now, I should say this still very often is the case, but from the end customer standpoint, whoever's receiving that message, they don't care that it's the marketing team who owns the marketing messages and the customer support team that owns the customer support chat bot, or that it's the IT team that owns the notifications. That's irrelevant to them. They just want a great experience from start to finish. And that means businesses are now having to rethink how they communicate with customers, because that expectation is just becoming bigger and bigger the more opportunities that you have with AI and these conversational channels. So let's take RCS or WhatsApp, depending on what market you're in. You may not already have RCS. You could now start out with a marketing campaign that gets sent to an individual. You could go through the entire purchase process including verifying that you really are who you say you are, receive your order, and then reach back out and say, I actually have a problem with my order. Maybe I purchased the wrong shoe size, for example. All of that is now possible within one channel, but that touches multiple different use cases as we just discussed. So you also need an infrastructure provider that can help carry over that context and also manage it, because that may happen in one channel, but it may also happen across multiple different channels.
One of the things that's come through this conversation that is interesting to me is infrastructure as the sort of core part of your AI strategy. And I have to admit that wasn't immediately obvious to me. I'm wondering if that's also a blind spot, or maybe that's obvious to the enterprise. I don't know.
I don't think it is obvious, because that's exactly what some of the survey findings are pointing towards. I think if people assumed that were the case, maybe they would have dug into some of the guardrails up front. You never know. Again, like I said before, though, you often don't know until you've deployed something at scale and you really see some of those real life scenarios come through. I think people often think about the model first because it's the most visible thing, or almost the last thing to fail. Whereas the infrastructure underneath is actually the first thing to fail. So what I mean by that is, if your message never gets delivered, it really doesn't matter if downstream your tone of voice isn't quite right. You really need to first fix that foundational layer. And so it's very similar to all the discussions we've been having around AI for, the last couple of years, decades even, in terms of garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, you really need to make sure you've got the right infrastructure in place so that messages get delivered on time to the right recipient, that the number it's reaching is actually a valid number. All of that needs to be in place before you even think about running different workflows and automated mechanisms on top.
Sophie, as we close up our podcast, we are literally right dead center in the middle of the year. We have half the year ahead of us. And the year is moving so quickly in terms of AI. What will be the characteristics of companies that are able to successfully scale up?
I love that question. I would say there's three things that stood out to us in our research so far. One, understand from your engineering team how much time is actually going towards building guardrails versus building that next best customer experience. So understand what's happening on that front. Then secondly, dig into, if your AI agent failed today, would you know before your customers do? And then thirdly, I would say, is your communications provider built for what you're deploying in the next 12 to 18 months? So thinking about those different angles will help set you and your team up for success.
Sophie, as ever, I'm really glad we did our podcast today. I learned a lot. There was a lot of stuff here that I would not have imagined. So I'm really glad you tested your theory or your hypothesis and found out new information. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this in a podcast we'll do later this year. But for now, where can we learn more about Sinch?
Head to our website. So it's www.sinch.com. So that is literally just SINCH.com. And we've got everything on the AI paradox there. Please note that it really is the initial survey findings. We're actually going to be publishing a lot more in the coming weeks, I want to say, on specific industries and markets as well. So if you're really keen to dig deeper on this, there'll be a lot more coming than what we've got right now.
Sophie, again, congratulations and the very best of luck on your new position. Sophie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doug. Great to be here.